Once upon a time, in the newly independent nation of Nigeria, there lived a charismatic and corrupt politician named Chief Nanga. He was a man of the people, adored by many for his charm and despised by some for his deceitful ways. Into his orbit came Odili, a young and idealistic teacher, who initially admired Nanga but gradually became disillusioned by the chief's manipulative and corrupt practices. As Odili's disillusionment grew, so did his ambition to expose and dethrone his once beloved mentor. The tale unfolds with schemes and betrayals, where personal and political lives collide, culminating in a dramatic confrontation that mirrors the turbulent spirit of a nation grappling with its newfound independence and the pervasive corruption undermining its potential. Thank you for watching.
I am an African.
Corruption and political turmoil, problems many African nations have faced and still face today. One author who didn't shy away from exposing this is Chinua Achebe. The book, A Man of the People. Hi, I'm Nathan, and this is the Africa for Dummies book club, where we aim to promote and highlight African authors or authors who have written about Africa. And joining me today is another book lover, but perhaps a new face on the show. Panashe, care to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Panashe Grace Berry, and I am a Zimbabwean student here in Germany. And during my free time, or during pockets of time that I steal throughout the day, I love reading books, particularly African literature, literary fiction. And yeah, everything to do with books makes me happy. But I'll keep it short, otherwise I want to talk about.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for the introduction, Panashe. Now, as we said before, the book that we're reading is A Man of the People by Chinua Achebe. Now, jumping into the book, but before we do, just a little bit about Chinua Achebe, who is the author of the book. Chinua Achebe was a Nigerian novelist, poet, and critic, considered the father of modern African literature. He is best known for his 1958 novel Things Fall Apart, which depicted the impact of British colonialism on the traditional Igbo culture, and become the most widely read book in modern African literature. Achebe's work explores the themes of colonialism, identity, and the complexities of African life through powerful portrayals of Nigerian society.
Yeah, and what I like is that this book really touches on how complex African life is now in the post-colonial era. And if you look at the many chapters in the book, they highlight a specific event or conflict or political moment, and it can be understood on its own, even though each chapter is part of like the continuous story. So that was one of my favorite things about the book. You can take some of the chapters as a standalone and something that have happened in the chapter. Yeah, so
Yeah, that's a good insight. I don't think I picked that up, but that's a really great insight. And jumping into the book, the story follows a young teacher by the name of Odili, who is teaching at the same school he attended in a rural village not too far from the main city of a country that obtained independence not too long ago.
Actually, when the book starts, the first chapter, he's talking about how the Chief Nanga is coming to that school for like you know how they do it at schools where they invite a guest speaker, it's either a minister or actually still when I read that part, I remember in high school when we had the Minister of Education was coming, and I still remember the amount of preparation we had to do. And so it just brought back that memory. But that's how the book starts. And actually, Chief Nanga, he was a teacher by profession, and Odili was his former student before he became a minister. But what's even funnier is how he became a minister, because he was just a chance taker. Like he just shouted out the right things at the right moment in the parliament, and that's how he became a minister. Nothing whatsoever to do with is he even passionate about that department, the culture or anything, just because, he was a chance taker. And what actually happened is that 2/3 of the cabinet was fired by the prime minister because they were disagreeing with him on something. And then the moment the 2/3 of the cabinet was thrown out, what he kept on shouting to say they should be killed and all sorts of things, he was seen as patriotic, in quotes, and that's how he became the minister.
Right, right. That's actually a really great summary of how Chief Nanga came to power. And as you said, Chief Nanga is a very powerful politician who soon begins. I think he met him at the event at the primary school, as you mentioned, and begins to bring Odili into the world of politics. And removed from the slow, boring life in the village, Odili is given a front row seat to the glitz and glamour of the life of a minister in an African country.
Mhm. I think this was the first instance that I picked it up, that first book. There's a lot of satire in it because you say that the minister's official residence had like 7 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms, one for every week.
Right.
But yeah, that was
Mm-hmm.
blank satire. And when Odili got there and he was in his room, the guest room that he got, that's when he kept on thinking about those things to say, like, this house has 7 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms, and just looking around to see, I can see the abrupt change. You're coming from like a rural city, and then you get right up to the most luxury place in the country, like a minister's residence. And one particular thing is that he visited the minister's library, like a big library in the house. But funny enough, as big as it was, none of the books interested him. He was like, none of the books
Yeah.
were to my taste. But then he ended up picking up like the newspaper, the Daily Chronicle, and he compared what he was reading in that newspaper, which was also one of the funniest part for me in the novel, because they were talking about how the city engineer, you have to get approval about the number of pills you want at your house, like pills, just to add meaning to that. It's like the bucket toilet. So he was comparing that to, like, this is crazy because it was saying the size and the materials of those bucket toilets. You have to consult a whole engineer. Like, it
Right.
was, that satire was very funny as well. And then he compared that to say, but the minister's house have 7 bathrooms, and then you not even a proper bathroom, but it's something you have to get approved by an engineer. And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a point that I maybe missed to our viewers, I didn't state to our viewers, but I think Odili is a very, as you mentioned, he went to the library. Odili is a very smart individual. In fact, he goes to the village because he doesn't want to be involved in the corruption and the fast life of, of the city. And, he, even as as Chief Nyanga is kind of like bringing him into the city, you can still sense this form of like resistance within him. I think the way he speaks, he still kind of has this like pride, like, oh, I wouldn't sell myself to, get this type of a life. And, but something makes Odili very angry. Like something changes in Odili's life that changes his perspective about Chief Nyanga, right?
Yeah. It was when he was now staying in Chief Nanga. At some point, he had settled in. He understood everything that was going on and everything. And then he attended a function at the hospital with Chief Nanga where he was supposed to give a speech. And then on their way there, I think, yeah, it was on their way there. Then Chief Nanga asked him about this girl that he was seeing. And he asked him a question, how serious are you guys? And then he said, this is just a good time girl. But when he now shares what was in his mind, he said that wasn't actually true, in as much as they were not at a point to get married. But what he said wasn't truth. She wasn't just a
Right.
good time girl. But so I also don't know why he felt the need to say it, even though he knew that it wasn't the truth. But yeah.
Yeah.
And then when they came back from that function, he came with the girl. It was Elsie. Yeah, Elsie. I was about to confuse with Edna. They came with he came with the girl back to Chief Nanga's place. And what's fun is that he also pointed out in the book, Chief Nanga told his steward that he should put her bags in his wife's bedroom. Like his wife had a separate bedroom, and she wasn't there at home. She had gone to the rural area with the kids. So, which was very weird because she's a visitor, and why would you say she should sleep like in your wife's room? But then,
Right.
and then it was sort of like a hide and seek game that they were playing, but they both did the same thing, but with different motives. Odili decided to wait a bit before going to where Elsie was sleeping because he was like, okay, I'm a visitor in this place. Let me at least wait for Chief Nanga to go and sleep. And he also was waiting for Odili to sleep, but they different motives. Because Odili was doing it out of respect to say, okay, I'm in someone's house. I can't just, at least let me wait for him to sleep. But he was waiting so that he could be sneaky. He was waiting for Odili to sleep so that he could be sneaky and go to Elsie's room. And when Odili found that out, that just made him really angry. But to some extent, Chief Nanga did ask beforehand to say, like, how scared are you guys? So already, like, it was like asking for permission to say, would you mind? And yeah.
Exactly. And I think, which is a very weird situation that happens because he himself also acknowledges, as you said, that he did say, like, we're not a serious relationship. However, as you mentioned, this really hurts Odili, and he attempts to repay Chief Nanga in kind by going to take Chief Nanga's mistress, who is also his soon-to-be wife, in the village. That fails, but he does end up falling in love with her, which gives you a perspective into the kind of person Odili is. So he then meets with his friend, who is part of the political party that plans on taking on Chief Nanga's party. But we are not going to ruin this book for the reader and would encourage everyone to go buy it instead. So now what we're going to do is actually just dive into the themes and reflections of this book. So I'll start with you, Panashe. What stood out for you and what is your main takeaway from this book?
Okay, I decided to look at it from two aspects. The first one being like in terms of the writing that Chinua Achebe used in the book. So that's the first part I'll look at. And then the second part is the themes, the actual themes in the book that stood out for me. There were a lot, but of course, like you said, we don't want to ruin the book. So I just decided to pick a few. And the first one, in terms of the writing he used, I really liked the proverbs in this book, like especially how he smoothly put them into daily conversations. Two of my favorites were one time when Odili visited Edna's father, and then Edna's mother was not feeling well. She was actually in the hospital. And then he said to Edna's father, we'll keep her in my prayers. And then he said he holds the knife and the yam, referring to God. And I think that was a very powerful proverb. Although, again, sometimes we say these things just as platitudes and not actually believing them, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
And the second one is when Odili's father was talking to him about taking up Chief Nanga's offer. I know this has no context because we didn't talk about this part, but yeah, he said to him, why don't you fall where your pieces could be gathered? For me, that's a very powerful proverb. Like, why don't you fall where your pieces could be gathered? And then the second thing that stood out for me in terms of Chinua's writing is also the satire and the humor in the book. I had so many moments where I found myself just laughing because, yeah, one particular time it's when Odili wrote a letter to Edna when he was really angry and deciding to break up. I can't really say break up because they didn't really have an official relationship. But he said, dear Edna, whoever put into your beautiful empty head. It was funny because
Yeah.
beautiful empty head. That's yeah.
Yeah.
You could see that he was really angry, and yeah. And the third one, the most important one for me, was how the very small things in the book, like the small moments, were used to show a pattern of like the bigger things in life. I always love that, to say you can use the smallest of things to really talk about the bigger things. It doesn't always have to be like those complex conversations where you can show the big important things, even if the small today things. And I think it's one of the common literally techniques that African authors use, because I've also seen it even in Chimamanda. She would just write about something very, very insignificant, but it's really saying a lot about the bigger things that are happening.
Could
And
you give an example of what you're talking about?
for example, the time when Chief Nanga was looking for a cook, because there was a time when the wife was going to go to the rural area for like a very long period of time, and he was looking for someone who would be cooking for him. And one of the people he interviewed, it was a guy. And then, of course, he asked, well, what are the usual dishes you make? And then he only talked about exotic cuisines and not like local cuisines. And then so he was asking him, okay, but you can cook. So at home, do you eat these exotic cuisines? Then he was like, no, I do eat like our food, our local meals. And then so that's why it really didn't connect, to say, but this is your profession. So you do eat, but then who's cooking for you? And then there was this statement that I'm going to directly quote, to say that as long as a man as long as a man confined himself to preparing foreign concoctions, he could still maintain the comfortable illusion that he wasn't really doing such an unmanly thing as cooking. So already, like that small thing, that okay, I was just looking for someone to cook for him meals, but that small incident already shows, even it's very indicative of the posture that cook has on a lot of things, in terms of really embracing I would say, for lack of a better word, local. Like, it's not only with the meals, but with a lot of things, he sees like the foreign things as superior to like the local things. Yeah, that was one of the.
Oh, okay. And like, okay, I see. So like, if you were to summarize the themes that you think you picked out from this book, what would they, like, just for the listener?
Okay, now I'm coming to the themes.
Mm-hmm.
Three themes really stood out for me. One, because if you saw in the book, there were times, not so often, where we could also get to know about Odili's background or his childhood. I think there were about 3 or 4 times in the book. And one theme that stood out is that mediating between oppressors and oppressed during colonial times, there was a cost that came with that, even afterwards. Because I still remember Odili, when he talked about the part that he didn't know that the interpreters were really hated by the local people until he got to experience it, because his father was an interpreter. And then it was way after the colonial time. But because of that history, his friend's father could not let him have a sleepover. The moment he realized he's a son of so and so, whom the father knew used to be an interpreter. So he still had that grudge from like the colonial time, and was like, "Who's your father?" He said, "Who's your father?"
Right.
Then, no, you can't sleep here. And he's just an innocent child, but still, the cost even carried through generations. And then the second theme is that doing things for the greater good, but for your own selfish motives. You can get away with it initially, but the cracks will eventually show, because your motive is selfish. And then third one is that the book really showed how like propaganda and how it diffuses, like it's very in a way that doesn't show, but the strategy would be there.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are great themes. For me, I think one theme stood out for me. Like the book to me just gave me like really one message, which was that we as people tend to only be involved in national issues or our national issues when it personally affects us. So Odili has all these bright ideas in the village, and he knows that corruption takes place in the city. And so he's comfortable being in the village and seeing the way the world sort of plays out, even though he has like smart ideas, even though he understands what's going on. And he was almost willing to be taken up by by the whole system. He was going to the parties, even though he was internally criticizing them. He was going to these parties. He was going out with Chief Nanga. It is only until it hurt him personally and deeply, that's when he starts to be like, no, we need to do something about this. So I think it's kind of a wake-up call to young people, particularly in our countries, to be invested in the things that are going on within our countries and to actually speak up when, things are not going the way they are, even if you're a person that I think is benefiting, I put that in air quotes, from the, political system, if I may,
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
now here comes the fun part. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate this book?
It's an easy 5 out of 5 for
Wow.
me.
Wow. Yeah.
Because even though it's a classic book, my experience with reading the book, I did not have to try too hard to understand what's going on.
Mhm.
So that balance to say it's a classic book, but I don't have to try too hard to understand it. It was a unique experience for me because with other classic books I have read or tried to read, I always have to try too hard, which is not really a bad thing because there's definitely books you read that are out of your comfort zone and you have to try hard and to put in the effort. And also, why it was an easy 5 out of 5 is the satire in the book. It just puts everything together in a perfect way. And also how prophetic it was. Because there were many times when I was reading this book and I was laughing because I can take out so many examples of things I have seen happen in Zimbabwe and considering this is something like a Nigerian author. So I kept on laughing and I was like, this is crazy. It's like I'm reading prophecy because this book was written
Right.
like decades ago. So that's why it's an easy 5 out of 5 for me.
Right. It's also surprising to figure out that the book was written quite a long time ago, although it seems to be dealing with issues that we're still dealing with today. With
Yeah.
regards to the rating, I would give it also. Now, I'm biased because this was my first fictional book that I read from end to end. I typically don't like fictional books, but I think I like this one because I sort of understood the things that he was saying in between the lines. Like there were statements in the book like, now it's our time to eat, which are things that you hear in political discourse in my country as well sometimes. So I think that for me was, I think for the first time in my life when I picked up a novel, I was like, I understand this. Like it was very easy for me to imagine what was going on and seeing what was going on because that's my reality, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, I would give it a 5 out of 5 rating as well.
Okay. And thank you for joining us and thank you for listening. I really enjoyed having this conversation and looking forward to more of this. And also, you guys can let us know what you think and if you agree with Nathan about the issues being still alive today.
Yeah. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next book.